Welcome to the Paru Zings, Appraisers on Purpose podcast. This podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? And what do they do now for their teams, their clients, and the industry? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Well, welcome back. We cited once again the fantastic feedback. So appreciative of everybody just taking a moment right now and going ahead and hitting the share button, give a copy of the link and send it on to somebody else. It's been wonderful. The unexpected feedback from people like, I didn't even know this existed. And I so appreciate getting to hear a little bit about others' experiences in and around the industry over a number of years or a lifetime that has really opened up possibilities. So that is fascinating. I have no doubt that today will be another fascinating opportunity. I'm really excited to have Jeff Lagrew with us. And Jeff, we always like to kick it off. We just want to know, were you born this way, or how did you come to get into this profession?
Oh, wow. I was practicing law in 1980. Well, I won't say the year because that would make me be really old.
Oh, come on, Jeff. We all know that you're just not a day or two over 29.
Yeah. In the early 80s, I was practicing law and did a lot of real estate law. Got involved in a lot of with a bunch of realtors and kind of and met some appraisers, a few appraisers, but not really. Usually just see their documents in closings.
Yeah.
And kind of, it seemed like a more stable part of the real estate business. The realtors are either getting really rich or going broke. And appraisers kind of get a little piece out of every transaction. So it seemed like a more stable thing.
Yeah.
And
wow.
They were getting ready. You said not talk about it, but that was in the middle or at the end of the savings and loan crisis. They were getting ready to regulate appraisers. And prior to that, you had to be an appraiser's son to be an appraiser, kind of.
Pretty much.
That's how it was. And so I knew when they regulated it, it was going to be you had to get a state license and then you were an appraiser. And I know you had numerous designations, and so do I, but the kind of things we got later, but it wasn't why we got in the business. And state regulation allowed me to get in the business without a certification from a national, firm kind of thing.
Fascinating. So you were an attorney first, is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Oh, wow. So how did you grow up wanting to be a lawyer? I mean, did you watch some of those great shows as a kid, or how did you get to law school?
I went to law school because I didn't want to get a job.
You're not the first person to say that, Jeff.
College, when I got out of college, I was either going to have to get a job or go to graduate school, so I went to law school.
Oh, man, that's fantastic. Wow. So you went to law. Did you take any time off, or did you go straight to law school?
Went straight to law school.
Oh, wow. How'd you spend your summers?
I was a sailing instructor.
Well, that's cool. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you were in Kentucky, right?
Right.
And you were a sailing instructor?
Well, my grandparents lived in Wisconsin on Green Bay. And my grandfather got me and taught me to sail when I was 3 years old.
Amazing.
So there was a place down in North Carolina. I went down to North Carolina and taught sailing every summer for college and graduate school.
That sure beats working in a fast food restaurant.
It beats bad. It's a lot better than saying you want fries with that. That is true.
Somebody like, what'd you do for the summer? Like, I was sailing. They're like, you were what? I mean, especially, having a similar home state. I didn't find sailing until I got to Chicago. I mean, it was power boats and bass fishing and all that kind of stuff.
That's right.
I find that fascinating. You're like, sailing from Kentucky. Wow, that's amazing. And so
I really enjoyed it, so I still do it, and
that's great.
Still teach it and still fool with it. So it's a great hobby.
Oh, there's hope. One day I could actually learn what to do other than just sit on the rail of the boat and be balancing out the weight so they can get the boat to go faster.
We have to drink beer too, so that's the other part. Yeah.
That sounds like a possible plan. We could definitely get that done. So you didn't go in to become a professional sailor. You went to law school.
I kind of wanted to become a professional sailor, but that's a tough road.
Oh, no, I don't know anything about it. No, nothing about that. Wow. So
It's a different podcast.
not a different podcast. That might be a couple beers then. So all right, we'll have to hold that one off then. Wow. So you get exposed. What kind of were you like a general practitioner, or what kind of law were you? Did you study?
I was a general practitioner, but I did a lot of real estate.
Oh, I see. And were you?
So that's kind of how I got involved in this business.
I see. And was your practice of law with a firm, or like how did you build up your experience? Because that's always an interesting challenge.
I was with a very small firm, and then I hung out my own shingle, basically.
Oh, fascinating. Well, that would give you all kinds of exposure to, wow, life and law intersect all too often. Most people don't realize that until they start paying attorneys.
Yes.
That's amazing. And so you loved law so much that you kept doing it and got into appraisal, or you kind of fell out of love with law and then you got into appraisal? Oh, wow. That's fascinating. Absolutely. Did you, a number of peers have both a law degree and some appraisal designations? Did you go down that path, or did you kind of stay clearly in the lane?
Yeah, I pretty much stayed in the lane of appraising. I've done some expert witness stuff and that kind of thing. Did some investigations for several states. I did some investigative work, and then I've also helped write the training for the state investigators did that kind of thing. So it's been probably the reason I got on the AQB.
Well, I was going to ask, you're the first person we've had a chance to connect with on the podcast that spent some time on the AQB. How long after getting into the profession did the opportunity arise for you to join the AQB?
Well, I guess the AQB came into existence when USPAP did in basically 2000 or 90.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, 1990. I've lost it.
Yeah, it's somewhere back there. We understand.
It's an age thing. Yeah. So in 2008, I went on it. I was 28 years in the profession by the time I got on.
So what was it like when you, as our podcast guest, I think that just yesterday was sharing that he got in the prehistoric times of appraisal compared to how appraisal is now with technology and everything else. He's like, it was exciting. We had tape and staplers. He goes, I don't know if people know what that was for, back then.
We used typewriters.
Well, see, now we're talking. Now we're bringing back some of the vintage opportunities. The power of the Smithsonian to really bring us back to it. So what was that like? Did you join a firm, or how did you get started once you committed to move out of law and get into?
There was a designated appraiser in Lexington who was starting this firm and needed somebody to work with. So I got him to train me.
Wow. And what was that like coming out? I mean, at this point, you've gone to college, you've gone to law school, you've been an attorney, a practicing attorney, and now you're in the early stages of the appraisal profession. Well,
it was very different because the law you learn as an attorney is not very specific. They teach you how to research, and a lot of being an appraiser is being a researcher. So, and again, this is prehistoric days when you went to the courthouse and actually looked up documents. You would look up deeds, go to the assessor's office, do those kinds of things. So I was very comfortable doing that, enjoyed doing that, a lot of travel involved. And I got very lucky. We had a client that was out of Dallas, Texas.
Yeah.
And they were an M&E firm.
Oh, really?
All they did was M&E.
Yeah.
And they had one person, they had 30 M&E guys.
Wow. Good size. Wow.
And one real estate guy. And the real estate guy could not keep up. So he would sub out to us the real estate portion of their work. And so I was, or I guess I still am, a private pilot or commercial pilot, actually. Fantastic. And so we were doing all these little factories all over the country. Really neat. I guess somewhere in my prehistoric mind, I'm an engineer at heart. I love to learn how things are made.
Yes.
And so we got to go to all these factories and learn how things were made. And because you go through the factory and get a tour and be around. And I've done everything from lipstick to jet engines.
That's amazing.
And so you kind of get to really see, and and you see how industry's changing. The thing that appraisers don't realize, or people that are looking at the business, you're on the leading edge. You're seeing a new building built, or you're seeing an old building torn down because it's no longer useful. So, and why is it no longer useful? Because the economy's changed. I know in 1992 or 93, I did 4 or 5. The company owned 9 plants, and I got my plane and flew around and saw all of them. One of them was up in Toronto, Ontario, and they were in Michigan and Indiana. They made carbon paper.
No, that's fantastic. They made carbon paper. Now, Jeff, I'm going to have to ask you to describe what it is and what you use it for, because unless you're in well, again, we have to go pre-COVID, but right up until pre-COVID, if you were in the one of the Cook County, especially if you're a building court in Cook County, they still used carbon paper.
Well, they had 9 plants that made carbon paper.
Wow.
They were able, 2 of them were modern enough they could convert to the carbonless. Remember the 3-page press card press?
Yeah.
And it was 3, and there was the carbonless thing, which was the next thing coming out. And they had one that they were keeping to make carbon paper because there were still people who needed it, and the other 6 were being shuttered.
So I was just going to say, we have a contingent of peers that know exactly what we're talking about, but there are some newer people in the profession that have no idea what carbon paper is. What is carbon paper? I mean, you don't need that for the internet, do you?
No, it was a thin film, thinner than a piece of typing paper or copy paper. I still call it typing paper because we typed on it before we put it in a copier, because they didn't have copiers yet. And the thin piece it was usually blue or black, and you would put it between 2 pages. So when you typed on one, it made an imprint on the second one. So you had 2 exact copies of things.
Fascinating.
And that's why appraisals were only 2 pages long.
Oh my goodness. So in those earlier days, when you started out, how long was a report? And tell us a little bit about that.
You filled in the blanks, and you had to put it on a typewriter, line up the carriage, and make sure it was going to type in the blank. And you took pictures with a camera, and then you sent them to get developed, and then you would tape them in the back of the report. And you would take a map, and then you would rub little arrows on the map of where your comps were located compared to your such. And then now commercial appraisal would be 20 or 25 pages long.
Oh, got them big.
It was pretty big, and it was, again, a typed document. And I didn't really do it because we were just starting to have computers in 1990. The first kind of personal computers came out in the late 80s. And so we did some typing. But of course, we were printing on a dot matrix printer with the carriage that would go back and forth.
Oh, yes.
And then again, we still had to glue pictures in.
Yes.
You'd print the whole report, and it was very frustrating because the fellow I worked for, before he would review the appraisal, wanted it ready to go out the door. So you would tape all the pictures in and have all the maps made, and then he would make a correction on page 4, which would change all the pagination from there forward. So you had to take all the pictures out and tape them in the next version.
Oh, that brings back such painful memories. Oh.
So the computer has been a boon and a bust for appraisals, because I think some things they let you just put too much information in.
That is a shared perspective many would line up and give you a high five for. Like, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right. And so they just copy Chamber of Commerce information and all sorts of stuff in the report to make it thick.
Yes.
Because it's obviously a better document if it's thicker, right?
I mean, many people, although they may not have heard this, many people will have known the phrase that it's obviously worth more because it's heavier.
Right. You pay by the pound.
Pay by the pound. For those that don't know, there was a thing called a phone book. and it wasn't a phone, but it was a book, and it had a lot of small type and a lot of information in there. Depending on the metro area you were in, the bigger that phone book was. Some reports at times seemed to rival the size of those phone books.
Oh, they were, and that people would brag, oh, I had a report that was as big as the phone book or 3 inches thick or whatever it was. And that was a tool. Whenever we would go someplace, so one of the first things we wanted to get was a phone book.
Absolutely.
So then we could call the bankers and call the other appraisers in town and call realtors, and you knew who to call.
Hard for some people to imagine in a world where they can just go to the Google machine and type some magic stuff in and get a result. But as you mentioned, you actually had to go to courthouses. You had to actually go look up documents or ask people to go look them up for you and bring them back and let you look at them. And then call people. I know it's a strange concept, but actually call people you didn't know, the people that were actually by the phone and answered the phone. And then someone else actually took a message for them and gave them the message. And they typically called back.
And I think a lot of the appraisers are missing not doing that.
I would agree.
There's so much knowledge in the ladies who run the courthouses.
Yes.
Especially in these small towns. The smaller the town, the more important it is you go to the courthouse.
Yes.
Because there is all sorts of information that really isn't recorded, except in their memory.
That's a wonderful way to put it. I remember one of the early commercial assignments I worked on was in
I recently appraised a branch bank, and it was the main office of a bank.
Yes.
And 2 small banks had merged, so one of the offices became surplus property. And so they needed that appraised so they could sell it.
Yeah.
I go in here to sell it or to appraise it. And of course, the assessor has their records, and I get a copy of that. Then I get a copy of the deed.
Yes.
They had just sold it. And you think, oh, I got everything. So I'm in the assessor's office asking them about potential other properties that have sold in the small town.
Yes.
They said, well, you got the deed on that, right? And they said, yeah. And I said, yes, I did. And they said, well, that deed's wrong.
Okay. And
that deed did not include a non-adjacent tract that was their parking lot.
Oh, that's important.
And they said, yeah, the attorney, you need to call Bill or whoever the attorney was. He's working on a new corrected deed. They're going to fix it. But, that you don't want to put that in your report. But if I had not gone to the courthouse and asked the ladies the question, you would have never known.
Nope. Not at all.
Get that information online.
Oh, no. No. You said it best. There's something to be said for that person-to-person experience.
Yeah. And that's what makes it fun. If you just want to sit in your office and look at pictures of buildings and write a report about them, I guess that's a job.
Yes.
It's not a career. I enjoy getting out and talking to the people and going in the field and being from Central Kentucky. I've appraised probably over 100 horse farms.
Fantastic. Wow.
Just to get to go out and see those beautiful farms and see what people do. And they're all different. They all show the people's personality. You meet them, you go through it. It's just, like I say, I started out doing all those industrial buildings. And you'll remember all when Union Underwear went under in Kentucky.
Was it?
And you go look at a plant with a wooden floor and 14-foot ceilings and have to figure out what can somebody do with it. And you had 100 ladies in there sewing labels in underwear at work because there was a bunch of sewing machines.
Yep.
You say, well, it's a 100,000-foot warehouse, but it won't hold any weight.
Yes.
So you get to talk about highest and best use and all those things that
sounds like a hay barn to me.
Yeah, I mean, and think about the tobacco industry, how it's changed.
Oh, absolutely.
All those tobacco bars, what are they now? They're a place to keep your tractor from getting rusty is what they.
I was just going to say, it's just a pretty backdrop in some landscape pictures, pretty much what those things are these days.
Yeah.
My goodness. Well, Jeff, what's it like? I mean, what a fantastic experience. Not only, what a renaissance man. You could sail, you were an attorney and you flew a plane. I mean, this is phenomenal. So here you are getting partner. So you made reference earlier to M&E. Some people may not know what that is, referring to machinery and equipment. So one of the big mistakes I know I had for the first many years I was in the profession is I didn't know there was any other kind of appraisal. I thought there was only real estate appraisal. There's all kinds of appraisal. There's machinery and equipment. There's inventory appraisal. There's, special kind of special assets type appraisal, whether that's jewels or art or
jewelry, the fine arts.
Yeah.
All sorts of people that do all the historical stuff, whether it's guns or whatever it may be, collectibles. There's a lot of different parts to the profession. Everybody as soon as you say you're an appraiser, they want to know what their house is worth.
Yes.
And hey, I don't know, and I don't want to know. But there's so many other parts to the profession.
Yes.
And then there's all sorts of stuff that's done even for real estate guys that you don't think of, whether it's highway condemnation work.
Yes.
For expanding highways or moving roads or building bridges. There's also all the stuff for estate work. Every time there's an estate, all that stuff has to be valued. And that involves personal property as well as real estate. And then there's the fun stuff with divorces and all those kinds of things, all the other legal work. There's some appraisers that only work for attorneys. That's all they do.
Well, that's what a specialization. I mean, I would dare say, maybe things have changed for you, but that had to be pretty fascinating. You go fly around the country into, I would assume, typically small towns, where a lot of these factories and stuff would be located.
Michael, we had another drop. You said go fly around the country, and that was the last I heard.
So I was saying, you get an opportunity to fly around the country. I assume a lot of these properties you were visiting were not in the most populous places, rather small kind of towns or not too big of a population.
Yes.
So did you guys throw a motorcycle in the back of the plane, or what happens when you land in a small town to go appraise a factory?
Every airport has a rental car company.
No kidding. Oh, wait, you learned something new here.
They're not all Avis and Hertz. Some of them are Billy Bob's. Here's the old car with it's out of a movie that smokes and rattles and you're ready and go around town and do. And so it's always interesting going to these little towns. I love it. They're really cool because they all got a personality.
Yes.
And, the center of all knowledge in most towns is at McDonald's.
Really?
Sure. You go to any McDonald's at breakfast,
Right.
and there's 5 old guys sitting around the table.
Yep.
And they can answer any question about the history of that town.
I thought you were going to tell me that either the local diner or the barber shop. That's what I thought you were heading there, but
kind of the same. It's kind of the modern version.
Yeah, I get that.
You wouldn't see on Andy Griffith, kind of the Floyd's Barber, now McDonald's and breakfast.
Oh, I love that. That's true though. That's brings back a lot of memories. That's pretty funny. And then, what was it like showing up? I mean, you're an outsider. You're not from these parts, as they would say.
Of course, most of these are big. What I was doing was big companies with multiple locations of manufacturing. So it was all around the country. We did Del Monte Foods and people like that. They're used to dealing with people from not around there on site.
Yes.
When now in the courthouse, you got to learn to just say yes, ma'am, and please, because that's who's going to give you the information.
Very much so.
The actual site visit to the property, that was pretty simple. And some of them would just say, here's a golf cart, go drive yourself around. I did a property that had over 100 acres under roof down in Alabama.
Cool.
And it was all add-on construction. It took me 2 days to measure.
Oh my gosh, 100 acres under roof. Wow.
Yeah, we did a titanium smelting plant up in Massachusetts.
Fascinating.
Like I said, I did a lipstick factory in Raleigh, North Carolina.
So given the timing, to help kind of people adjust to the experience you're having, you fly into some, maybe smaller town with a factory that is the main employer in that area, and you're appraising the real estate. How do you go about gathering data across that region, that state? maybe a multi-state area? What was that like back then?
Well, then it involved a lot of travel because most little towns only have one, maybe two big factories like that. That's the town.
Mm-hmm.
And a building will sell once every 5 to 10 years. So there are no comparable sales in that town. So what we ended up doing is we built a database of other small towns.
Oh, okay.
Get that one building or two buildings in it. And that's because you can't compare something in a small town in eastern Kentucky with something in Louisville.
Nope.
Or small town in Indiana with Indianapolis. Even it may be a 10,000 or 20,000 foot metal building, but it's not the same. And so we would have to find another town with 5,000 people in it that had a 20,000 foot building. So there was a lot of time involved. You know, we would do an appraisal and it would 3 to 4 weeks to do the research. It was a lot slower. It's not like residential where they do it in a week or 3 days.
3 days. Yeah. Yeah.
So it was and once you did a bunch of them, it's like anything, you build your own database. That's why the people who do nursing homes do more nursing homes, because once you learn how to do one, you're doing one. And you've got the data from the other ones you did. And so I guess appraisers tend to specialize, and doing a residential as a specialty. I would never try to do a residential house.
Probably a smart man for saying that.
I mean, I know the theory of how to do one, but I don't have enough to learn to do the research to make a $500 check.
Yeah, a lot of them like to get $500 these days, but it is specialty from the perspective of so many disciplines in valuation and so many asset types, specialty asset types across the country.
Yeah, I know appraisers that the only ththing they appraise is golf courses.
Wow.
Or marinas, or like I said, nursing homes or hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of find something you like and then you get good at it.
Love that. Such a broader perspective of what's possible in an industry that otherwise gets a bad rap for just such a narrow perspective of just residential real estate. There's just so much more.
Well, and it's a real, for someone young if they can live through the first 2 to 3 years of sporadic income and get stabilized, it's a tremendous opportunity, because I don't know what the average age of an appraiser is, but I'll bet you it's way north of 50.
Oh, it's way north. If you look at, it's like 60 plus, depending on, well, not exactly, but yeah, it's in the 50s, head towards 60s, depending on whose data you look at.
Yeah, I would say it's closer to 60 than it is 50.
Yep.
And there's only 80,000 appraisers now. And you figure only 20 to 25% of those are doing commercial.
Yes.
And that's what I look at. So I'm dealing with 20,000 people to appraise everything in the United States, and they're all a bunch of old people. So if I'm 25 years old, I'm thinking, this is a place to land.
That's true. That is true. I was just going to say, given this vast experience that you developed, appraising properties, did you stay in that, work with that same designated appraiser up until you joined the AQB, or did you have some other opportunities?
I stayed with the same one for about 10 years. And then I took a break for about 6 years or 8 years and went and worked in the Attorney General's office.
Oh, okay.
And then when I came back, I came back to a different firm, and I was with them for 25 years.
I see.
And it was a 6 to 8 person firm.
Yes.
And everybody within the firm kind of had a specialty. It wasn't on purpose, but somebody really liked to do apartments, so they did all the apartments, or they got the first shot at them anyway. And like I said, I did horse farms, I did industrial property. We had a guy who loved doing car dealerships, so he did all the car dealerships.
Oh, all right. Fascinating.
So it's kind of, everybody picked their own poison and what it is. And then for the last 2 years, I've worked as a review appraiser. Well, I started doing about 7 or 8 years ago some custom review appraising for banks, just on specialty work.
Yes.
And now I do it full time.
Amazing. So I would imagine most people in the profession will never serve on like the AQB or ASB, what have you. Well, what's it like? Like, what do you do when you're on the AQB?
Well, it's kind of daunting in a way. First of all, we write the national exam that they use for appraisers, so we had to do that. And then on the AQB, and we set the minimum standard rules for becoming an appraiser. And of course, it's a very tough thing because the appraisers want it to be in a profession, so they want you to have a college degree. They kept raising the standards, and then all of a sudden there's a shortage of appraisers because they raised the standards. Because historically, appraising was a second career. It was people who worked at a bank or who were realtors, and they did that for 10 or 15 years, and they flopped over and became an appraiser. And all of a sudden, because you had to have a college degree and because you had to have all this experience, you couldn't just jump in and become an appraiser. So there was 160,000 appraisers in 2006.
Oh, wow. I did not know that number. 160,000 in 2006.
Well, 2006, of course, was the kind of balloon of the housing.
Yes.
And it took until 2021 that prices were the same as they were in 2008.
Yes.
So, people don't realize it took that long, and now we're going to have another one. So it's can't borrow money at 3% anymore. So that's going to change.
Oh, goodness gracious. So how much of your time as a professional is a part of the AQB? And that, is that a full-time responsibility? Is that a part-time thing? Is that like the way you'd be like the PTA? I mean, most people have no idea what's involved.
Oh no, it was a part-time. It's a volunteer thing. There's 8 people on the AQB, 8 people on the Appraisal Standards Board, and they are picked Appraisal Foundation, and you serve a 2-year term, and you can only be on it for 8 years. Is the most, and then your term limited out. Very few people on it 8 years. Most people are on 3 or 4.
I see.
And it's just how much time can you give, because you've got to meet 4 times a year and go someplace and meet and take time off. It's a little different now because I think they're doing a lot of their meetings remotely since COVID, so that will make it easier.
Yes.
But we were in person, and we spent about being on that was about a 30-hour a month job.
Oh wow. Wow.
We were told to keep track of our time and doing all that stuff. So it was work. I was in charge of all the complaints against USPEP instructors.
Oh, geez.
I was always having these hearings, with USPEP instructors when people didn't like their class or didn't think they taught correctly or they did something wrong. So there was other things, and then we had to spend. Well, we would take a week and do a retreat somewhere and work on the national exam each year.
Interesting.
Because that's updated now. Now they redid the whole thing in 2008 to the new modern exam. And it's really done well, not just because I helped do it, but it's a bank of questions now. So every year they add new questions to the bank. So you're getting a random test. So it's really well done, but it takes a lot of time. They had professional writers come in to write the exam questions, and then we would edit them to make them make sense. And we all sit in the room for a week, going through question by question and saying, this one doesn't make sense, and answer B could be correct, but answer A is the one, so we can't have that in there. It's a real all thought out thing. Test is not there to trick you.
Got it. Amazing. So how did your professional experience either expand or change coming out of that time?
It kind of showed me I got to meet a lot of people in other towns and bigger farms and other areas, and interacted with them for 8 years on a professional basis. So very interesting, and there's a lot too, because there's some of these firms are nationwide. They have, hundreds of offices all over the country. And that's a total different practice than what I've done. I've done a soup to nuts appraisal. I get it. Go look at the building, take the pictures, measure the building, and find the comps, determine the value. Whereas they do more of, they have somebody goes out and looks at it, measures it, takes pictures. Somebody else does research. It's a more of an assembly line deal. And I've not worked for one of those firms to know whether that's a good or bad experience, I guess. They get paid salary, which is different.
Yes.
The chat.
Oh, that's a whole different kind of experience. I mean, you've literally been on a number of different sides. Do you even did you work for a lender for a period of time as well?
I worked as a review appraiser for a lender. Of course, now I work as a review appraiser for 44 lenders. So,
well, talk about wearing some hats.
Yeah, so it's with an AMC, and it's different because commercial stuff really doesn't. The AMCs were designed for residential work.
Yes.
So it is a totally different set of rules and everything else. But we're the virtual appraisal department for those banks, and it's good because a lot of these small banks used to have, they're doing 5 appraisals or 5 commercial loans a month, or now they're doing 2 a month. And they really couldn't afford to pay professionals to man all those positions and, keep all the stuff that you need to keep, and keep the records, and keep the various things to make sure you're following the rules and being impartial and all those kinds of things. Not hire your friend to do the appraiser because he's going to give you the value.
Yeah. Interesting position to be in. As you said, now you work with, I think you said 44 lenders in that role of essentially an outsourced appraisal department, and getting to see such a broad range, hands-on, not in a true AMC space where it's removed, but like you're right in there as an integral part of that lending institution.
So that is interesting, and they're all over the country. They're in California and Florida and Massachusetts and Pennsylvania and Ohio. And so you're getting to see, it's not all the same. It's not a cookie cutter. We're doing a whole bunch of houses in Hialeah. We're doing stuff all over the country. So it's really interesting. And you got to keep your mindset to local markets.
Got it.
You can't say, $10 a month rent or $10 a square foot rent. Is that high or low? Well, depends on where you are. And you go out to places in San Francisco, they're paying $100 a square foot. And okay. That's the market. So you're always learning.
Yes.
When you quit learning, you're not going to be good in this. There's no appraisers knowing all. And the ones that quit learning are in trouble.
Such a good spotlight and reminder for individuals about continuing not just to invest in their own ability and experiencing maybe different product types or different asset types, what have you, but as you touch on, just staying in touch with the market. I mean, things change, progression happens.
Absolutely. And it's very hard because we're trained to use historical data to project the future value of something. And like now, 2 years ago, you could borrow money for 3%. Now it's 7.5%.
Yes.
And so your sales that are a year or two old that you would think would be valid were based on 3% income. And now they're based on, you've got to say, okay, but I can't use a 5% cap rate or 5% return because I can't pay back a 7.5% loan.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of sticker shock going on right now, or negative sticker shock, I guess. and we're going to see that, and it's not going to be pretty because people don't tend to not keep a lot of equity in the property. They like to borrow all they can and stay very leveraged. So the people that are not leveraged or leveraged at a lower percent are going to come out of this smelling like roads.
That's well said. That's well said. Just talking to a banker a couple of days ago about how a number of his clients are screaming because they took 7A loans from the SBA, and they're trying to get into 504 to at least come down from 11.5% interest rates down to something in maybe the 7s.
Yeah, we're not talking about politics. So I'm not going to give them a government.
Oh, wow. That's definitely the case there. So what, at this point, Jeff, you've seen so many different things. You've literally flown around the country, whether on a commercial charter or on your own plane. What do you look at out in the future? And anything hopeful out there in the next, 5, 10, 15 years, or it's not so much?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have a correction for the next couple of years. I mean, if you look at historical interest rates have been 5 to 7%. And so we got to roll back out of this 3% stuff. And we want to have, the nice thing about real estate is they don't make any more of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's all supply and demand.
Yeah.
And our population continues to increase.
Yes.
So if there's more people, you've got to have apartments to put them in or houses to put them in. And those people have to have places to work. They have to have grocery stores. As long as there's an increasing population, there's going to be an increasing demand for real estate. And there's going to be, somebody's got to tell people what stuff is worth. I know there's a whole lot of people talking about AI. They talk about all these programs that can do valuation. And I think that's going to catch up to the residential market because a lot of tract subdivisions are built. There's 3 sets of plans for 300 houses. And you can go in there with a computer and say, okay, all the ones with this floor plan are selling for $200,000. Therefore, this house must be worth $200,000.
Yes.
And that's pretty easy especially with manufacturing. Manufacturing, they build the building around the assembly line. They'll get a building and put assembly lines in it. So they're very unique. Retail property, we're going to see, I don't know what's going to happen with purchasing on the internet. Obviously, it's very popular, but people still want to touch clothes, those kind of soft goods. They want to feel the material, and there's going to be a balance. I don't think you're going to see another Sears or a Kmart or a thing. You're going to see, these specialty shops and then you're going to walk out and order your stuff online, but you went in and touched it. So there's going to be an interesting change there. Office buildings, how are they going to change? Since COVID, nobody wants to be in a 50-story building anymore with 50 people in an elevator every day. So we've seen a huge decrease in towers as far as, their higher vacancy rates. They can't get higher rents. But the 2-story building with a parking lot in front of it, where you go see your dentist, those are going to be needed. There's also the technology changes. The attorneys need to be across the street from the courthouse anymore when they can get all those records out of the courthouse electronically. There's a lot of things out there. And that's why people specialize in different parts and they really understand it. But all the different parts of the market, and you can't say real estate's a great investment or real estate's a bad investment because it's all different. Every piece is unique.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure the first class they taught you every piece is unique because the first lot's only 50 feet from the corner. The second lot's 100 feet from the corner. They may sell be the same square lot. There's not very much difference, but they're slightly different. So they're all going to be different. And the absorption, are people still going to do single family homes or are they going to all move to high rises? And they went to that and now they're moving back because of COVID, they don't want to be in that elevator. We're seeing that kind of thing change even residential properties, which are very, very strong right now. So there's all different segments. Look at car dealerships.
Sure.
Look how it's changed over the last 20 years. Now you're going to this fancy, shiny mall almost kind of building to buy a car as opposed to a hut on a lot full of cars. So, it's an ever-changing thing. It's really neat. You're seeing historical stuff though too. You know, the Chrysler Building in New York is still really a cool building.
Sure is.
You know, so I mean, there's some pieces of stuff that have been built that are just architecturally neat buildings, and then you see stuff that's a square box, and that's the one that's going to get torn down. The next square box, they build a different box. So it's fun, and then you get all the another specialty you're talking about of appraisal. These people do all this historic preservation and restoration.
Yes.
Again, that's kind of a sub part of the residential market. Even the residential market, I think, has specialties within it.
Oh, it does.
You know, there's people that only do high-end homes. There's people that only do tract homes. And then there's people, like I say, do the historical homes.
Absolutely.
So there's just, it's a multifaceted business. Everybody has to deal with real estate every day because we all walk on the ground. It's the question is, do you care what the ground you're walking on is worth?
That's an interesting way to put it. I haven't heard it said that way before, but I have to agree with you on that one, Jeff.
And do you care? And do you care that this ground is different? What's on the left side of the street is different or the same as what's on the right side of the street? And
Yeah, do you care? And if you don't, then you keep moving. And if you do, then call Jeff. You know, they need an appraisal.
That's right.
Oh, man. Well, Jeff, I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure just to get an opportunity to bit of walk down memory lane, but also an appreciation for how much things have changed and how much is still the same, but maybe it just shows up in a different capacity. And you've touched on a lot, different access to information. Speed, of course, is a piece of that. Technology is a big component, but you know, valuation is still greatly needed and not going away anytime soon. So very encouraging.
It is the same, and it's different. It's just delivered in a different fashion.
That is very true. That is very true. Well, Jeff, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for a little chat here today. It's a pleasure, and just going to wrap up here. Just again, thank everybody for spending some time with Jeff and I here. Learn a little bit more about what it means to fly around the country. Maybe you should go get your pilot's license too and get your designation at the same time. Who knows what kind of opportunity might be available to you. And as Jeff touched on, there's a lot of different specialties, be it asset type or even types of appraisal. So many things to consider for those that are either in the industry and wondering what else might be available, or if you're not yet in the industry and you're thinking about that could be interesting. The answer, as you heard from Jeff, yes, it is. And the broader your view, the more opportunity that shows up. So make sure that wherever you listen to our podcast, be that on Spotify or on Apple or any other platforms, please go ahead and hit that like button and definitely go ahead and share, because it continues to have a positive impact and influence in our industry to, as Jeff talked about, help attract and retain great talent that can keep it going forward. With that, again, thanks for joining us here on Perusing the Power of Values. And until the next one, have a fantastic week.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing life paths and achievements of our guests. Don't forget to like us on LinkedIn and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.